You're watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Today a conversation with Nabeel Ahmed about smart cities. But first, some news headlines. Report reveals concerning levels of anti-Arab attitudes in Canada. Tomato products in Canadian market could be outcome of forced Uyghur labour. Zero tolerance for racism, says Nova Scotia Premier. 15 mosques attacked in India, 3 destroyed. And Israel reinstates Palestinian hunger strikers' administrative detention. And now the details. A survey conducted by ECOS Research Associates shows a concerning level of racism towards Arabs in Canada. The survey revealed that Canadians tend to have negative stereotypes of Arab people and their home countries. Words used to describe Arabs include violent or fanatic. The survey found that Canadians hold more negative views towards immigration from Arab countries compared to immigration in general, yet that Canadians are generally opposed to racial profiling of Arabs. Further analysis of the data showed a divide on perceptions of racism along party lines. While only 38% of Canadians concurred that there were too many Arabs in Canada, the number almost doubled to 68% within Conservative Party supporters. An investigation by CBC Marketplace reveals that tomato products stocked in big chain grocery stores can be connected to forced Uyghur labour. Tomatoes harvested in China or tomato paste produced in China under repressive conditions are then sent to Pakistan, Philippines, or India to be developed into other tomato-based products like spaghetti sauce. They then make their way to Canada, where they are sold under company names including Nestle, Del Monte, and Unilever. The Chinese government has detained Muslims from Xinjiang and subjected them to physical and psychological abuse before placing them in forced labor factories. Early this year, Canada declared China's actions a genocide. Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston fired a staff member from his office following their racist comments towards Angela Simmons, a member of the Legislative Assembly. According to the CBC, the staffer's comment, sent over Snapchat to a friend, said that Simmons was prompt in playing the race card and did not know what she was speaking about. Premier Houston fired the staff member quickly after hearing reports of the comments. He notified Simmons shortly after. Simmons agrees with the Premier's decision, saying that comments like these cannot pass without consequence. Hindu extremist mobs attacked 15 mosques this week in Tripura, India. 3 rural houses of worship were completely destroyed. Shops and homes owned by Muslims were also attacked. The mobs were organized by Vishwa Hindu Parishad, or the VHP, and its paramilitary group Bajrang Dal. Both are close allies of the ruling party Bharatiya Janata Party, led by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The VHP has previously led a movement to destroy the historic Babri Mosque in Ayodhya, India. The mobs were taking revenge for recent attacks on Hindus in neighbouring Bangladesh. Bangladeshi police have arrested 500 Muslims for the attacks. Bangladeshis are furious about India stripping the citizenship of Bangladesh-speaking Muslims in India's Assam state under a new law. Israeli authorities have reinstated the administrative detention of a Palestinian detainee who has been on a hunger strike for 107 days. On October 14th, the Israeli Supreme Court issued an order freezing Al-Fasfous's administrative detention. To protest his imprisonment without charges or trial, Al-Fasfous was among the many who went on a hunger strike. According to the new decision, he will remain in administrative detention until December 14th. Israeli authorities have barred Al-Fasfous's family and lawyer from visiting Al-Fasfous. Currently, there are close to 5,000 Palestinian detainees in Israeli prisons, including 520 administrative detainees. That's it for the news. And now a conversation with Nabeel Ahmed about smart cities. Welcome to the show, Nabeel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Now we hear this catchword smart cities, but can a city be smart? What does it really mean?
I think that's a very good question. And it's really a phrase that emerges from a lot of marketing over the past decade, I would say, primarily by IBM. But really, when we speak of smart cities, we're thinking about how cities can use data and technology and operate in ways that are more efficient. And usually, we're referring to the use of new and emerging technologies, even though it's actually true that cities have been using technology and data for decades. Certainly, at least for over 50 years, cities have been using technologies, but it's
So
only
jump in then and ask you. So the two things there that we could bounce off. One is, how have cities been using technologies, and then what does it mean? You said we maybe shouldn't use this word smart cities, but what does that mean in terms of data technology? What's the new use that you're mentioning? So maybe those two questions.
Sure. So think about traffic, for instance. For decades, cities have been tracking data on how much traffic there is at major intersections and using that to plan for the future of roads and other developments in that area. So you can see that that's a very clear example. And for years, cities have been using red light cameras, for instance, to see if cars are violating the red light, the signals. And so that data has been used for a long time. I think now, over the last few decades, we've certainly seen an explosion of new kinds of devices. So, for example, you can have automatic number plate recognition, or you can have sensors that can actually count the number of pedestrians on the street. What that allows for is more detailed information gathering, more specific information gathering, greater accuracy and reliability, greater speed, and that opens up new opportunities for cities.
And then when I think about that, I immediately go to the idea of George Orwell and Big Brother watching and tracking our every move.
Mhm.
So how's the thinking through on the issues of privacy in this new technology world?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're asking a really good question. So I think the use of data technology is not, of course, limited only to cameras. There could be many other things that are used. But I think definitely there are opportunities here for greater state control, as a la Orwell in 1984. But there's also opportunities for citizens to play a greater role. So, for instance, if I'm walking on the sidewalk and I see that there is a pothole that needs to be repaired, I can report that to my city instantly using an app. And whereas maybe 20 or 30 years ago, I would have to go to City Hall and file a complaint, or I have to write a letter and mail it. Now I can take a picture with my phone and I can send it to my counselor, or I can send it to the city directly and let them know that there's something that needs to be repaired. So, but these are, I think, are the important thing is that these are currently options. We're in a new world. To kind of cite another writer, Aldous Huxley, we are in a brave new world. The future is what we make it, and I think that's what's really important as we think about, whether we think about smart cities or the future of the city in general, is that we have choices that we need to exert, and that's where the democratic process is really important.
I don't know if we should use the Brave New World analogy, because I'm pretty sure what I remember from high school lit is that's all about hierarchy and people being happy with their place. But you're saying that this smart city can also have that aspect of citizen engagement, always assuming that the councillor on the other end is actually going to open the app and look at the photos and respond. That's a different issue, I guess.
Sure. Yes, you're right. I mean, to be very specific, actually, in most cases, it's not a city councillor who would actually, get access to that photo. It would be the city staff, and it's their job to do that. If they're not fulfilling their job, that's a different conversation that we need to speak about, right? But in my experience, and I'll say this, that there's a lot of skepticism in the public around the role of government and about what public servants do. In my experience, most of them are like all of us, which means that most of them, they do the job that they're supposed to do. If they don't do their job, they're let go. Most of them, maybe not all of them, are the best in the world at their job, but they tend to be good at their job, and that's why they have those jobs. And many of them care about public service. That's really what I have experienced.
So we have been experiencing through COVID a dramatic drop in public transit ridership, but also, and then an increase in cars on the road. And I know that that has raised the issue of emissions and congestion, and the activists who have been campaigning against the suburban sprawl and how that impacts cities. How does the quote unquote smart city concept address those issues of emissions and sprawl and congestion?
The short answer is that the smart city concept doesn't directly address that concept. In fact, it doesn't directly address necessarily most of the major challenges that we face in cities, whether it's the use of public transit, whether it's housing, whether it's poverty in the city. The idea of smart cities, the idea of using data technology is really about using tools to better achieve the ends. But if we really are serious about addressing the issues, then we have to understand why they exist. Urban sprawl does not exist because of a poor use of technology. And so a better use of technology will not address that. Urban sprawl exists because of land use planning, because of decisions made, because of cultural preferences for larger homes. That's why urban sprawl exists. And unless we address that, no technology can address it.
So, and that's why you said at the beginning then that we are making choices about the cities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the urban cities have been evolving for years, and I think it's very important for us to understand that they evolve as a result of choices that people make, and that's expressed through political preferences. That's expressed through the representatives that we place on city councils, and that's how we can actually exert our voice on what we want the future of the city to be.
Do you have then a vision of what you think the future city should be?
I don't think it's for me to say what it should be, not to be prescriptive. I think there are many things that we recognize right now in Canadian cities that are troubling. We see greater inequality. We see greater housing unaffordability. We see food insecurity. These are major challenges cities are facing, and they're, to be frank, and this is sometimes a challenge as well. These are challenges that are experienced at the local level in cities, but they're of course affected by decisions made at multiple levels of government. And so in order to ensure a better life in, let's say, the city of Toronto, you actually need the federal and the provincial government and the city of Toronto to be working closely together, and on addressing the basic issues, for example, the housing supply crunch that we are all familiar with.
I read that the smart city concept, or the use of data technology, as you've saying we should call it, can do things like help with water efficiency because it can set up systems to monitor leaks and things like that. Do you have any special shout outs, I guess, you would want to give to how data technology can address those other issues that you've mentioned?
Yeah, so for example, you can definitely put in place sensors to find out about leaks in the water system. You can the use of smart sensors in energy is quite commonplace now. You can identify where most of the energy is being used, and instantly identify on maps where that's happening, what the frequency of that is, and diagnose those causes. Maybe a decade or two ago, that would have taken a lot of work to do, and would have been, you would have to send someone out to actually go through the pipes and check what the issue was. Now you can do that much faster. But I think it's important to remember that that's an improvement in efficiency, which means that it takes fewer resources to do the same thing, which is good. But if, for example, we're using too much water, that doesn't address that problem.
Right. So I see what you're saying. You're saying there are bigger issues, and technology something to use to make it better, but you have to have the vision in mind. The last question I would ask you is about security. Apparently, there was a cyber hack at a water treatment plant in Florida. So that now that we're having these data technologies connecting us in better ways, but opening ourselves up to new risks. Can you talk about that a little?
Absolutely. So technology certainly is a means to an end, and it can provide some benefits, but it can also lead to harms. And if you're collecting a lot of data and that can lead to privacy issues, and it can lead to cybersecurity issues. And those are two separate issues I should name. So, for instance, if my water utility is relying on technologies to do its functions, and someone hacks into that system, they could potentially jam the water system if they wanted to. But the other issue that you're noting is that, for example, if I, Nabeel, pay my water bill online and someone can access my records, then they can then they might be able to interfere with my payments. They might be able to steal my identity, and those are two different kinds of concerns that are increased. And what's important to note is that this is in a environment. So there's the concerns around state surveillance that you had mentioned with Big Brother, but there's also concerns around what is known as surveillance capitalism, where basically now you have new businesses that really rest on and they make money from buying and selling the data of people like you and me. And that can be at the individual level and at the societal level as well.
That's unfortunately we're out of time, but I that phrase surveillance capitalism, that sounds like a topic for another day. So we thank you very much for coming on the show and just sharing a little bit of your expertise about cities and smart cities and urban design. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
You've been watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Take care. Stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe and God bless.